delicate Polaroid trembles in my hand as I gaze at the battered, time-worn image. A girl no older than 12 stands motionless before what once must have been a grand Victorian house. Now in ruin, its paint peeling, windows dark and shuttered. Her posture is stiff and unnatural. Her eyes, wide and hollow, reflect no spark of life, as though something essential has been extinguished within her. This photograph marks my first introduction to Eliza Blackwood. Stamped in the faded lower corner is the date, July 17th, 1973. I hadn't known what awaited inside the unassuming box of photographs and interview transcript folders from my late uncle's estate, but I certainly could not have anticipated the chilling darkness that lay within. These materials belonged to Dr. Thomas Whelan, my uncle, who served as a child psychologist at Evergreen Children's Home in Millfield, Pennsylvania, a facility that abruptly closed its doors in 1974. Among the children he treated, perhaps the most enigmatic was Eliza Blackwood. Her case notes filled with references that seemed to defy reason. When I first opened the archive, I expected routine clinical documentation, behavioral assessments, therapy plans, commonplace observations. Instead, what I discovered suggested something far more unsettling. Each transcript revealed a child fractured, and each photograph, Eliza frozen in unsettling stillness, seemed to whisper of an unholy calm. I felt as though her image on that Polaroid was less a record of life and more a testament to the hollow husk of existence. Dr. Wen's earliest entries about Eliza were clinical, matter-of-fact, mention of nightmares, social withdrawal, episodes of muteness. But pretty quickly, his tone shifted. The handwriting became erratic, the language more urgent. In one transcript, he describes how Eliza sat perfectly still for hours, staring at nothing, refusing to eat. Her eyes are vacant. It is as if she sees something no one else can perceive. He wrote in early August of 1973. The timeline of his notes tracks a disturbing progression. In July, she arrives at Evergreen seemingly ordinary but reserved, possibly orphaned or abandoned. Within days, Dr. Wen notes she claims to hear whispers in the walls. She drew images of dark shapes smeared on wallpaper, eyes glinting in dark corners. He initially chalked it up to overactive imagination born of trauma, or perhaps attention-seeking. But the phenomena escalated. By late July, she was speaking in voices, unfamiliar, disembodied tones that seemed to come from the empty house itself. She described scenes of people long dead, looming in corridors, beckoning her to follow. Staff members began to avoid passing by her room. One night, a nurse reported hearing low humming, and when she checked, Eliza was standing with her back against the wall, her eyes closed, lips moving in silent prayer or chant. And then there were the photographs. My uncle's case files contained dozens. Eliza in different corners of that dilapidated home. In one, she stands under a broken chandelier, face half shrouded by shadow. In another, she is seated at a dusty piano, fingers hovering above keys that hadn't been played in years. Yet another shows her standing in the overgrown garden, a perfect reflection of the derelict house behind her. In every image, her posture is impossibly controlled, unnaturally rigid. Her face, expressionless, inscrutable. These images were not captured by accident. My uncle made them part of his formal assessment. They were meant to help him understand her psychological state. But I wonder now if he suspected something beyond science, perhaps an encounter with something malevolent. His transcripts hint at fear, moments where he paused and questioned his own work. In one jagged entry, he touches on a phrase that strikes me now as so eerie. She knows things, terrible things. I fear I cannot help her. That line was underlined 3 times. In early September, his tone becomes frantic. He records that Eliza's whispering voices grew louder. She began asking staff to open books that didn't exist, asking about rooms that no longer stood. She claimed the house was alive, that it pulsed with dark secrets. She insisted that the walls were bleeding. Occasionally, she would smile, but the expression bore no warmth. It was cold. I can make out, in one black and white photo from that time, that same smile, thin lips curved upward, but her eyes told a different story, one lodged in terror. By October, Enclosing documents reveal the home's leadership decided to shut Evergreen Children's Home. Though the official statement cited financial troubles and accreditation issues, Dr. Wen's notes suggest far more than administrative failure. One undated memo, likely an internal report, said, after multiple incidents involving Eliza Blackwood, including unexplained sounds, lights flickering in empty rooms, staff fainting, we must suspend operations. There is a brief mention of local press rumors, reports of screaming heard at night, odd luminous figures in the gardens, a girl wandering the halls reciting unknown languages. All of this ended with the home's sudden closure in early 1974. After the shutdown, my uncle was transferred briefly to another facility but later retired. His final entries include retrospective notes. I fear I failed her. She left here broken. Whatever followed her beyond these walls, only time can tell. There were no further updates on Eliza. That was the last mention in his records. Holding the Polaroid again, I feel the weight of years, over 50 years since that photograph was taken. Eliza's hollow eyes still haunt me, as though she is trying to reach from beyond the frame. The decaying house behind her feels less like a setting and more like an entity, as though it exerts a pull on her spirit. Reading every line of Dr. Wen's transcripts, I sense a shift from scientific clinical care into hopeless confrontation with something inexplicable. Why did my uncle save these files and photographs? Why did he never alert authorities or write a public account? He was a respected psychologist, bound to treat trauma and guide healing. Instead, he preserved evidence of something unhealed, unexplainable, and inconceivably dangerous. Now, with the archive in my hands, I feel compelled to uncover more. What happened to Eliza Blackwood after the closure? Did she survive? Did that ominous darkness travel with her? Is she still alive? And what exactly lay hidden in that Victorian structure? Walls that whispered, tear-duct tears turned crystal, hollowness where life should have been. There is power in silence, yet terror in its presence. The house is silent in the photograph. Eliza is silent then. Yet within those files, the silence resonates like a scream. I don't know whether to hope that her condition was cured, or to dread that it ended something far beyond illness. For now, the mystery endures. Eliza stands immortalized in that single frame. Dr. Wen's words trace the record of her collapse into something unconditionally uncanny. The house rots behind her. The year was 1973, and the story refuses to fade. Holding this Polaroid, I feel I am gazing into more than the past. I sense an invitation, an echo, beckoning me to follow. But there is danger in looking too deeply. Some mysteries will not stay buried, and some spirits are far harder to exorcise than walls. Yet I cannot turn away, for the girl in that photograph is waiting. Waiting, silent, hollow-eyed, and I am afraid of what I might see if I keep looking. That summer of '73 in Pennsylvania was a stifling ordeal. Nixon's Watergate hearings crackled on every TV, while Led Zeppelin's Houses of the Holy drifted from radios. Children zipped down streets on Schwinn bikes as parents fretted over the oil crisis. Millfield, a quiet speck of a town, carried on as usual until Eliza's arrival disrupted its calm. A rusted sign swayed lazily in the humid air as Officer Ray Dalton's cruiser rolled up the gravel path to Evergreen. Once a coal baron's pride, the building now housed orphans, its weathered bricks and peeling trim hinting at years of neglect. Any more from her? Ray asked, glancing at the social worker beside him. Margaret Collins gripped her vinyl handbag, her knuckles whitening. Nothing since we found her. Just those sketches, she replied, nodding toward a manila folder on the dash. Inside was a child's crayon drawing, stick figures sprawled under brown shapes, a house consumed by flames. The Blackwood family home, 5 miles away, had been reduced to ashes. Robert and Sharon Blackwood were presumed lost, though no bodies were recovered. In the back seat, Eliza Blackwood sat motionless, her gaze fixed on the passing scenery. She hadn't uttered a word since being found wandering Route 27 3 days prior, her nightgown charred, her feet lacerated by glass and gravel. Ray stole a look in the mirror. Her gaunt face and limp dark hair sent a shiver through him. Those eyes seemed to see beyond the world. "Seen a doctor?" he murmured. Margaret nodded. "Physically okay, just minor burns and cuts. Dr. Wen's ready for her. As they approached the entrance, the heavy oak doors creaked open. Mrs. Eleanor Winters emerged, her silver hair pulled into a severe bun, her presence commanding respect. Known for her iron rule, she greeted them with a brisk nod. "Miss Collins, officer." Her eyes lingered on Eliza, still in the car. Ray opened the door. "Come along, Eliza. This is your home now." She stepped out mechanically, clutching a tattered teddy bear with one missing eye, ignoring Mrs. Winters' extended hand. Her gaze swept the windows, searching for something unseen. "My parents are waiting," she rasped suddenly, her voice a dry whisper that chilled the air. Margaret knelt beside her. "What was that, sweetheart?" But Eliza clammed up, hugging her bear tighter. Dr. Thomas, when observed from his office window, captivated by her eerie stillness. With 15 years working with troubled children, he'd seen shock and withdrawal, but Eliza's demeanor was unique, alert, not empty. A knock sounded. "Enter," he called, closing her file. Mrs. Winters stepped in, Eliza trailing behind. "Dr. 1, meet Eliza Blackwood." Thomas rose, offering a gentle smile. "Hello, Eliza. You can call me Thomas." Her eyes darted bookshelves, diplomas, the worn couch, pausing on the wooden floor. "Thank you, Mrs. Winters. I'll take over," he said, his tone carrying a subtle rebuke. She favored discipline over his methods. The door clicked shut. "Sit, please," he invited. Eliza perched on the chair's edge, feet dangling above the ground. "I know you've faced something hard," he began. "Care to share?" Silence. Her fingers traced her teddy's fur. "Nice bear. Got a name?" "Mr. Buttons," she mumbled, avoiding his gaze. "Hello, Mr. Buttons," Thomas said warmly. "Eliza, do you know why you're here?" Her eyes locked with his, piercing. "Because they think my parents are dead." "And you?" He pressed gently. "They're waiting. Underneath. Beneath the floor." The room was dim, intentionally so. A lamp cast a muted glow across the carpet, its soft flicker barely touching the corners of the office. Bookshelves lined the walls, but Eliza Blackwood paid them no mind. She sat in the wooden chair across from Thomas, her frame still and stiff, her arms tucked around herself like a shell. She hadn't spoken for the first 5 minutes of the session. That wasn't new. Thomas, experienced with silence, let it sit. He scribbled slowly in her file. Possible delusion, trauma response, potentially grief-related. Symptoms suggest dissociative tendencies. Coping mechanism? He paused, the pen hovering, then added. Lost context unclear. May involve fire. Further probing required. He looked up. "Eliza," he said gently, "can you tell me about the night of the fire?" The question seemed to ripple through her. Her fingers, which had been tracing the grooves on the armrest, froze. Her gaze remained low, fixed on her lap, but something had shifted. "They argued," she said softly, so quietly he had to lean forward to catch the words. "About the noises." Thomas tilted his head slightly. "What kind of noises?" A pause. Then, from underneath. He noted the phrase carefully. "Underneath the house?" She gave a single, sharp nod. Thomas tried to keep his tone neutral. "Who was arguing?" Her voice grew firmer. "Mom and Dad. That night. She said it wasn't normal. Said the noises had been growing louder." Thomas's pen moved slowly, capturing every word. "And what did your father say?" He said, "It was just the house settling." Thomas had heard the phrase countless times, parents using it to soothe scared children. A classic response to creaking floorboards and shifting pipes. But this didn't sound like a frightened child misinterpreting sounds. Her voice wasn't afraid. It was resolute. "Did you hear the noises too, Eliza?" Another nod. "They whisper." Thomas felt something tighten in his chest, a flicker of unease. Still, he kept his expression calm, professional. "Can you tell me what they whisper?" "They don't use words." "What do they use?" She looked up then, for the first time in the session. Her eyes met his, and for a moment, he saw something ancient flickering behind them, something too old to belong in a 12-year-old girl. "They hum. It's like remembering something that hasn't happened yet. Thomas blinked, caught off guard. What do you mean? Eliza's expression changed. Her lips pressed together, and her gaze drifted downward, away from him, toward the floorboards. They've been trying to rise, she whispered. Thomas's pen stilled over the paper. Who's been trying to rise? They have. She didn't elaborate. Who are they, Eliza? Silence. He waited, giving her space, hoping she might return to the thought. But she didn't. She kept staring at the wood beneath her feet. Her shoulders had tensed, her small hands now clenched into pale fists. Thomas's mind turned over the words, trying to rise. Not leave, not escape. Rise. He gently shifted the conversation. Was that the night of the fire? She didn't answer, but her body trembled slightly. Then, so softly he almost missed it, she said, they tried to stop it. They thought fire would hold them. Who tried to stop it? She looked at him again, this time with wide, sorrowful eyes. Mom, and your father? Eliza closed her eyes. He didn't believe, not until it was too late. Thomas leaned back, heart thudding a little louder now. This wasn't the first time he had encountered a child speaking of fantasy, of monsters, of imaginary beings. But something about Eliza's conviction unsettled him in a way he couldn't explain. Her calm delivery, the specificity, the distance in her tone. It was as though she wasn't remembering something but reliving it. Did your mother set the fire? He asked gently. Eliza flinched. She said it was the only way. And what happened? She hesitated. They screamed. Not her. Them. From underneath. The floor shook. Then everything went red. Thomas set the pen down. What about you? Where were you? I was in the hallway, watching. I wanted to help, but Mom locked the door. She told me not to listen, told me not to open the door, no matter what I heard. She looked back down, hands gripping her knees. I didn't open it, she said, even when it stopped, even when it was quiet again. And then the house burned, but not all the way. Thomas frowned. What do you mean? They didn't let it. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Something stayed, waiting. A chill passed through the room then, and though it was impossible to measure, Thomas felt it. The air seemed heavier. Eliza hadn't moved, but it was as if she had drawn something in with her words. Something unseen, hovering just outside understanding. What's waiting, Eliza? He asked, but she was silent again, staring downward to the floorboards. He looked too unthinking. There was nothing there, just aged oak, some scratches and scuffs. But somehow, he couldn't shake the feeling that beneath them, far beneath, something might be listening. Something might still be humming. He picked up his pen again, reluctantly. Patient exhibits clear dissociation, possibly trauma-linked delusion centered around parental conflict and a fire-related incident. Strong fixation on underneath as locus of threat, manifestation of grief or repressed memory. Then, in smaller print below the rest, barely legible. Still, her eyes, she believes it, and I think part of me does too. The first night at Evergreen was always the toughest. The old building creaked as it cooled, and faint sobs echoed down the halls. Eliza shared room 17 with 13-year-old Susan Parker, who'd been there 3 years since her mother's arrest. Susan watched as Eliza placed Mr. Buttons on her narrow bed. That's it? No clothes. Everything burned, Eliza replied, smoothing the blanket. Susan's eyes widened. The fire? That's awful. You'll get donation clothes tomorrow, mothball stink and all. Here is a rewritten and expanded version of your excerpt, now extended to approximately 1,000 words, while preserving the mood, meaning, and tone of the original scene. A sharp knock echoed through the hallway, jolting the girls into silence. It was firm, deliberate, the kind of knock that carried authority. Moments later, the door creaked open, revealing the angular silhouette of Mrs. Winters. Her presence seemed to drag the room into colder silence. Lights out in 5 minutes, she announced, her voice crisp and emotionless. Her sharp eyes scanned the room and landed on Eliza, lingering just a second longer than necessary. "No wandering tonight, Miss Blackwood," she added with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You know the rules." Eliza didn't respond. She merely nodded, eyes locked on the woman, her expression unreadable. With a final glance that seemed to weigh more than just discipline, Mrs. Winters turned and exited. The heavy click of the door behind her sounded final. For a moment, the room seemed to exhale. "She always knows," Susan muttered from across the dimly lit room as she slipped under her wool blanket. Like she's listening through the walls or something." Eliza remained standing, unmoving in her place by the bed. She looked down at the clothes she wore, ill-fitting pajamas borrowed from the communal closet, their sleeves too long and the fabric carrying the faint scent of mothballs and bleach. Slowly, she lay down, tucking the coarse blanket up to her chest, her eyes fixed on the ceiling above. Water stains traced bloated patterns across the plaster, abstract shapes like islands or maybe bruises. "Susan," Eliza whispered after a stretch of silence. "Yeah?" came the sleepy response from the neighboring bed. "What's under this place?" Susan shifted, propping herself up on one elbow. "Under? Yes," Eliza said softly, still staring upward. "Beneath the floor. What's really down there?" Susan thought for a moment. "I mean, just the basement, right? Storage and the boiler room. Maybe some broken furniture or old records. That's what they tell us." Eliza turned her head slightly, her voice quieter now. "Can you hear them?" There was a pause. "Hear who?" Susan asked, her tone uncertain. Eliza closed her eyes. Later that night, the silence returned like a shroud. The usual nighttime orchestra of creaking pipes and distant wind scratching at the eaves had faded into something else. Eliza's breath slowed, her thoughts drifting to the flickering images that haunted her since arriving at Evergreen. A cold hand brushing her neck, muffled voices with no source, and dreams that felt like borrowed memories. She listened intently, faint, almost imperceptible. A whisper, not of wind, but of something beneath. The sound was not consistent, but rhythmic in its own way. Not quite language, not quite noise, like breath passing through stone. She sat up slowly. Across from her, Susan was fast asleep, her mouth slightly open, her breath steady. Eliza watched her for a moment, envying her ability to rest, to forget. Eliza slipped one foot onto the cold wooden floor, then the other. Each step away from her bed was deliberate, as if challenging the silence to betray her. She crept toward the center of the room where the boards were looser. She discovered that earlier that week when retrieving a fallen pencil. Kneeling, she pressed her ear to the floor. There it was again, a deep groan, a pulse, like something alive, and then soft thuds. 2, then 3. Not the kind a person makes, but something heavier, older. The sound of movement where there should be none. Suddenly, a crack from the hallway snapped her upright. Her heart pounded, and she spun around, eyes wide. But it wasn't Mrs. Winters. It wasn't anyone. She sat frozen for several moments before retreating to her bed, blanket pulled tightly around her. But sleep would not come. The next day, during free hour, Eliza waited until no one was watching. She slipped down the west hallway, where the paint peeled in sheets and the air smelled of rust and forgotten time. A storage door stood at the end, marked staff only. But the lock was loose, Eliza had noticed days ago. She turned the knob and stepped inside. It was darker than she expected, the only light coming from a sliver through the warped wooden door. Dust motes danced in the beam as if stirred by something unseen. The air was dense, heavier with each breath. Boxes of old files, toys, and rusted furniture loomed around her like silent sentries. At the far end, a staircase spiraled downward. She hesitated, then took a step, then another. The further she descended, the colder the air became. Not the kind of cold that made you shiver, but a cold that settled into your bones, as if the very walls resented your warmth. At the base, she reached a narrow corridor lined with stone walls. Light bulbs flickered overhead, some completely dead, others buzzing softly. And then she saw it, carved into the far wall. A symbol, faded and almost gone, but clearly drawn by hand. It looked like an eye, Below it, words were etched in uneven handwriting. They do not sleep. They wait. Her breath caught. A sudden whisper echoed, not from ahead but behind. Eliza. She spun around, but the hallway was empty. The light above her buzzed louder. Eliza. The voice was softer now, like a memory. Her legs moved before her mind could stop them. She sprinted up the stairs, stumbling as she burst into the storage room, slamming the door behind her. She didn't look back. She ran. That night, when the knock came again, she didn't speak. She pretended to be asleep as Mrs. Winters peeked in. The woman's gaze swept the room like radar, but just before she shut the door, Eliza swore she saw it. Mrs. Winters' hand lingered on the frame, tracing something into the wood. A mark, the same eye she'd seen in the basement. Then the door shut. Eliza lay awake, unmoving, staring at the water-stained ceiling again. This time, she didn't ask Susan what was beneath them, because she knew. And whatever it was no longer asleep. At 2:17 a.m., Susan jolted awake to a scratching sound. Blinking in the dark, she traced it to Eliza's empty bed. In the nightlight's faint glow, Eliza crouched, scraping at the floorboards. "What are you doing?" Susan hissed. "Mrs. Winters will." "Shoo, I'm listening." Eliza cut in, pressing her ear to the wood. "They're louder at night, calling me." A chill gripped Susan. "You'll get splinters. Get back to bed." The board groaned, shifting slightly. "See," Eliza whispered, a hint of triumph in her voice. "They want me to find them." "Sure. Here's a rewritten version of your short passage expanded into a 1,000-word narrative while preserving the original meaning and mood. It deepens the atmosphere, character emotions, and dialogue." Susan took a cautious step backward, her eyes wide with disbelief. "I'm getting Mrs. Winters," she announced, voice barely above a whisper but firm with nervous resolve. The air in the room had grown heavy, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. "No," Eliza said quickly, reaching out and grabbing Susan's wrist with a surprising intensity. Her grip was cold and desperate, anchoring Susan in place. "You can't. Please. If anyone else comes, they'll stop." Susan hesitated, torn between reason and the raw fear in Eliza's eyes. "They'll stop what?" Eliza swallowed, her gaze flickering toward the floorboards where she'd been kneeling moments before. "The voices," she whispered. "They only speak to me when I'm alone, when it's quiet." A silence stretched between them, broken only by the wind rattling the old window panes and the subtle creaks of the aging building settling around them. Evergreen Children's Home was old, too old, some said. It carried history in every peeling wall and creaking stair. But to Eliza, it carried something else. Something alive. "What do they say?" Susan asked finally, voice trembling as curiosity battled her better judgment. Eliza looked up, her eyes glassy but focused. "That they're waiting," she said. "That we'll be together soon, like it's promised, like it's already written." Susan shivered. "We? Who's we?" But Eliza didn't answer. Instead, she turned her attention back to the warped floorboard beside her cot. Her small hands moved with determined care, fingers tracing a groove she seemed to know by instinct. She pried at the edge of the board until it gave a soft groan and began to lift. Susan hovered nearby, heart pounding. "You've done this before," Susan said, more accusation than question. "I had to be sure," Eliza murmured. "I needed to find it again." As the board lifted fully away, a thick, stale odor crept into the room. A musty scent, earthy and ancient, like wet soil left to rot in shadow. The cavity beneath was narrow and dark, a void of splinters and dust. Susan took a step back, waving her hand in front of her nose. "Ugh, what is that smell?" Eliza ignored her. She was already reaching into the darkness, her arm disappearing into the hole up to the elbow, her brow furrowed in concentration. "It's here," she whispered. "I know it's still here." Susan bit her lip. "There's nothing down there, Eliza. Just junk or rats or whatever's left after 50 years of no one caring." But then, Eliza's hand emerged, trembling. holding a small object that caught the faint moonlight filtering through the window. It was a delicate silver locket, old and tarnished. The chain twisted and knotted around itself. Eliza clutched it to her chest with reverence. "What is that?" Susan asked, now kneeling beside her again. Eliza slowly opened the locket, revealing 2 tiny photographs inside. Though faded and worn, the faces were unmistakable. One of a man, the other of a woman. Both smiling, both familiar. "It's them," Eliza whispered. "My parents." Susan leaned closer, studying the faces. "How did this get under the floor?" she asked, stunned. Eliza shook her head. "They left it for me. They've been trying to reach me from down there." The words hung in the air like a fog. Susan's skin prickled. "Eliza," she said cautiously, "this place has been abandoned longer than you've been alive. That locket could have been there for decades." "No," Eliza said firmly. "It wasn't there before. Not until tonight. They're trying to tell me something." Susan stared at her, at the strange conviction in her voice, the way she seemed more connected to shadows than the living. She wanted to dismiss it all, to laugh it off, to tell Eliza she was being silly. But the certainty in her tone, the chill in the room, the way the hair on her arms refused to settle, something about it all felt wrong. Before either of them could say another word, the hallway outside their room groaned under the weight of approaching footsteps. "Quick!" Eliza hissed, pushing the loose board back into place and tucking the locket beneath her pillow. They scrambled into bed just as the door creaked open and the narrow silhouette of Mrs. Winters filled the threshold. She scanned the room with her usual cold precision. "Lights out was 10 minutes ago," she said. "No more talking." "Yes, ma'am," Susan and Eliza chimed in unison. Mrs. Winters lingered for a moment longer, her eyes narrowing slightly. Then, without another word, she turned and disappeared down the hallway, her footsteps echoing away. The room fell silent again. Moonlight etched silver patterns across the ceiling as Eliza stared upward, her thoughts swirling like dust in the air. "Do you think she heard us?" Susan asked, whispering now. Eliza didn't answer immediately. Then she said, "I think she already knows." "What?" "She knows something. She always has. Like, the way she watches me. Like she's waiting too." Susan turned to face her. "Waiting for what?" Eliza clutched the locket beneath her pillow. "For the night they rise." Susan shivered again and pulled the blanket tighter around herself. "You need to stop talking like that. You're freaking me out." "I'm sorry," Eliza murmured. I feel them. Below us. Like they're calling to me." Susan stared at the ceiling, heart thudding. "There's nothing under this place except the old basement. Boiler room. Storage. That's it. That's what they tell us," Eliza replied quietly. "But we don't know what's sealed behind those walls." "What was?" Susan rolled away, pulling the covers over her head. "Just go to sleep." Eliza lay still, the locket clutched in her palm, her eyes open until the first bird sang. She waited, listening to the whispers that only she could hear, echoes rising from the earth below, calling her home. Mrs. Winters' flashlight swept the room before she left. "Eliza," Susan whispered, "how'd your parents' locket end up under here?" No response. At breakfast, Susan stole glances at Eliza, who nudged soggy cornflakes. The locket was gone. "You look spooked, Parker," 15-year-old Kevin Reed taunted, sliding onto the bench. "Stay out of it," Susan snapped. Kevin turned to Eliza. "You're the fire girl, huh? Said it yourself." Her spoon clattered. They were already underneath when it started. The fire couldn't touch them. "Underneath what?" Kevin pressed. "The floorboards." Eliza met his stare. Uneasy laughter spread. "Weirdo," Kevin grinned. "Enough, Mr. Reed." Dr. Wynn cut in, holding coffee. "Kitchen duty?" Kevin slunk off. "Thomas, Saturday morning, Eliza. How was your night?" Susan blurted. She found a locket under the floor, with her parents' picture. Eliza fished it from her pocket, setting it down. Thomas inspected it. "Your parents? Found it last night." She nodded. "They're underneath, waiting. Concern etched Thomas's face. "Why were you under there?" "I told you," she whispered. "See me after breakfast." As he left, Susan asked, "You're not in trouble, right?" "He doesn't believe me." "None of them do, but they will." At Dot's Diner, Ray and Fire Chief Bill Mercer sipped cold coffee over the Blackwood fire report. "Electrical fault?" Ray asked. "No. 3 start points intentional," Bill said. "The girl mumbles about her parents underneath. Margaret calls it trauma." "No bodies," Bill noted. Margaret rushed in. Dr. Whelan found something at Evergreen. In his office, Ray held the locket. "She found this under her floor?" Thomas nodded. "Her roommate saw it." "Impossible," Margaret said. "The house was rubble." Ray studied the photo. "Looks like Robert and Sharon Blackwood. Could she have hidden it?" "She had only her nightgown," Margaret insisted. "How'd it get here?" Ray pocketed it. "I need to talk to Eliza." In the recreation room, Eliza sketched a house with prone stick figures under brown lines. "Eliza," Thomas said, "Officer Dalton wants a word." "Found them yet?" she asked. "Found who?" Ray crouched. "My parents. Still looking." "Tell me about the locket," he said. "They left it so I'd know where to find them. Under the floorboards." "We searched your house," Ray said. "You didn't look deep enough. They hide when others look." Margaret pulled Ray aside. "She's traumatized, inventing stories. Feeding this won't help." "I've got missing persons and arson to solve," Ray countered. Thomas nodded. "There's truth in her words." In the girls' dorm, Susan found her things moved. "Mrs. Winters said you requested a switch," her new roommate Jenny said. "I didn't," Susan frowned. A scream pierced the air. A crowd gathered outside room 17. Mrs. Winters pushed through. "What's going on?" The floorboards were torn up, a hole circled by buttons and shoelaces. Eliza rocked beside it, muttering. "Miss Blackwood, explain," Mrs. Winters demanded. Eliza ignored her. "Clean this mess," Mrs. Winters ordered Jenkins. "Take her to my office." "Don't," Eliza warned. "They don't like strangers looking." Jenkins led her away. Susan lingered. Jenkins peered into the hole. "Kids," he muttered, flashing a light. "She says her parents are underneath." He pulled out a wallet. "This can't be right." Ray arrived, bagging Robert Blackwood's wallet. "Found it under the floor?" Jenkins nodded. "Felt off. Cold. Smelled like decay." Ray's radio buzzed. "Back to the Blackwood property. They found something. Under the foundation, a blood-stained root cellar opened to a tunnel." "Someone dug this later," Bill said. Ray descended, finding a table with bones and jars. A small door led deeper. Child-sized footprints marked the earth. A scraping sound echoed. "Animal," Bill suggested. Ray drew his gun. "Stay here." They followed to a chamber with carvings and an empty chest. Fresh footprints led to another passage. A humming voice, Eliza's, called, "They're waiting for you too." At Evergreen, Mrs. Winters reported Eliza missing. Ray and Thomas found a passage under the boiler room. Eliza stood in a stone chamber, singing with Mr. Buttons on a carved symbol. "Eliza," Thomas called. "You came," she said. "They said you would." "Who?" Thomas asked. "My parents and the others." Ray's radio reported a fire. "Upstairs is burning," he said. "We need to go." Eliza smiled. "The fire's coming. They burn what they can't take." Thomas grabbed her. "There's a real fire." She resisted. "I'm staying with my parents." The ground rumbled. "Another way out?" Thomas asked. She led them to a hidden door, emerging near the Blackwood property as Evergreen burned. Eliza stood motionless, her eyes reflecting the distant blaze as Ray and Thomas emerged from the hidden passage. The air carried the acrid scent of smoke, and the orange glow of Evergreen Children's Home illuminated the night sky. Ray wiped sweat from his brow, his radio crackling with urgency. "Did you start that fire?" he demanded, his voice tight. Eliza shook her head slowly. "They did," she said, her tone eerily calm. Who? Ray pressed, his hand hovering near his holster. The others. They're not people anymore, she replied, her gaze drifting to the trembling earth. A low, rhythmic drumming pulsed from below, vibrating through their feet. The ground bulged a few yards away, soil cascading as something pushed upward. Get back! Ray shouted, but Eliza stepped forward, arms outstretched. A pale, clawed hand broke the surface, its fingers unnaturally long and jointed. Ray drew his gun, heart pounding. Eliza, stop! A creature emerged, its elongated skull and black, oil-slick eyes sending a shiver down his spine. More followed, their emaciated forms clad in tattered rags, moving with an insect-like grace. Thomas froze, recognizing one's distorted face. Sharon Blackwood, he whispered. The creature that had once been Eliza's mother smiled, revealing pointed teeth. Thomas, it rasped, its voice a warped echo. We've waited for you. Ray fired, the shot echoing through the clearing. The bullet struck, but the creature barely flinched, its expression shifting to mild curiosity. Your weapons can't harm us, another voice intoned, this one resembling Robert Blackwood. We are beyond such things now. Eliza ran to the creatures, embracing the forms of her parents. I knew you'd wait, she murmured, her voice muffled against them. I told them you were underneath, but they didn't believe me. Ray grabbed Thomas's arm. We need to run now. Thomas hesitated, transfixed. What are they? He breathed. The Great Rising, the Sharon thing answered. Every 100 years, we surface to gather new ones, bringing them below where true life begins. Dozens more emerged, forming a tightening circle. The fire is our herald, the Robert thing added. It purifies the world above for our return. Soon, all will be underneath. Eliza turned to Ray and Thomas, her face serene. Don't be afraid. It doesn't hurt. You'll join us forever. The creatures closed in, their long fingers reaching. Ray counted the gaps, his mind racing. When I say run, head for the trees. Don't stop, he hissed. Thomas nodded, his scholarly composure shattered. What about Eliza? She doesn't want saving, Ray said grimly. Now! Ray shoved Thomas toward the tree line. They crashed through underbrush, branches slashing their faces. Behind, unearthly howls rose as the creatures gave chase, their speed unnatural for their gaunt frames. The trees thinned, revealing the gravel road and Ray's cruiser, keys still in the ignition. There, he gasped. They sprinted, Ray wrenching the door open as Thomas dove into the passenger seat. A creature lunged from the woods just as Ray started the engine. Tires spun on gravel as Ray reversed, executing a sharp turn. In the rearview mirror, Eliza stood between her transformed parents, her smile unwavering. The cruiser fishtailed onto the main road, accelerating away. Silence hung heavy, broken only by their ragged breaths and the engine's roar. Thomas stared out the window. What were those things? Ray shook his head. Not human. Not anymore. His radio crackled. All units. Evergreen is fully engulfed. All occupants accounted for except Dalton, Juan, and the Blackwood girl. Ray grabbed the radio. This is Dalton. Wen's with me. We're on Route 27 toward town. The Blackwood girl. He paused, meeting Thomas's eyes. What could they say? Officer Dalton, confirm her status. The dispatcher pressed. She's with her parents now, Ray said, his voice hollow. As they crested a hill, the full scope of the disaster unfolded. Evergreen a pillar of flame, emergency lights flickering weakly. Beyond, fires spread through the woods, a relentless tide. Thomas's voice trembled as he stared out the windshield. It's happening like she said, he murmured, his words barely above a whisper. The air in the car grew thick, heavy with something unseen but deeply felt. The trees lining the road swayed violently, though there was no wind. Ray kept his hands clenched tightly on the wheel, the whites of his knuckles stark against the dark leather. His foot hovered above the gas pedal, torn between flight and disbelief. The fire is coming, Thomas said again, more to himself than to his companion. A realization rather than a warning. Ray's eyes didn't leave the road, but his voice was steady. "We need to warn people. Get them out." Thomas looked over at him. "And tell them what? That the ground is birthing fire? That the dead, or whatever's beneath, are clawing their way to the surface? We'll be dismissed as lunatics." Ray's jaw tightened. "We don't have to explain everything. We just tell them there's a fire. That's real enough. Real and dangerous." The headlights caught something ahead, shadows in motion. Maybe animals, maybe not. Ray instinctively slowed as they approached Millfield's outskirts. What had once been a quiet, forgotten Pennsylvania town now felt like the edge of something ancient and waking. The pavement had changed. Cracks like veins spread across it, and the road appeared to bulge unnaturally in several places, like something beneath was pushing its way upward. One section just ahead of them was visibly warped. The tar split wide, revealing steaming earth. "No," Ray whispered. His hands were shaking now. "It can't be." Thomas leaned forward, his breath fogging the windshield despite the summer heat. "They're surfacing everywhere. Not just here. Not just beneath Evergreen." The engine idled as both men stared at the unfolding scene. Flames flickered between cracks in the earth as if breathing. The orange glow lit the trees and painted the town sign, "Welcome to Millfield," in eerie shadow. Behind them, the sky remained dark, unaware. Thomas opened the door and stepped out, heat rushing over him in waves. The air smelled of sulfur and ash. He walked cautiously to the split in the road and peered down. Beneath the cracked asphalt, the ground pulsed. A low, rhythmic hum emanated from the depths, barely perceptible but deeply unsettling. Ray joined him, wiping sweat from his brow. "We were fools to think this was about Eliza alone." Thomas nodded slowly. "She was just the voice, the messenger, the medium. But this is older, ancient." A distant siren wailed, a fire truck, maybe, or perhaps something worse. Lights flickered in the town center. A dog barked frantically. The peace of Millfield was shattered. Thomas turned to Ray. "I have to go back to Evergreen. There's more in my uncle's files." He must have known more than he let on. He saw something back then, something he couldn't explain. Ray hesitated. "You're not going alone." "I'll be fine," Thomas lied. He knew going back to Evergreen meant stepping into the eye of this gathering storm. But he also knew the answers were buried there, with the children's records, the hidden journals, and the lingering whispers that hadn't stopped since 1974. Suddenly, the ground shuddered. A deafening crack split the silence. The bulge in the road erupted, spewing flames and a thick, acrid smoke. A charred hand, blackened, skeletal, burst through the broken earth before disintegrating into ash. Ray stumbled backward. "We have to leave. Now." Thomas remained, rooted in place. "They're not rising to destroy. They're rising to be heard." Ray grabbed his arm, dragging him back toward the car. "Heard or not, they'll burn everything. We can't help if we're dead." The two men climbed into the car and turned around, the tires squealing as they sped away. Behind them, Millfield glowed orange, like the mouth of an awakening beast. But this wasn't over. It was just beginning. As they raced through the night, the sky ahead remained calm. But in the rearview mirror, flames danced higher, reaching for the stars. Thomas closed his eyes, Eliza's words echoing in his mind. "They're waiting. We'll be together soon." He finally understood. This wasn't just about the past. It was about reckoning. And the reckoning had begun. Ray stopped the car, mind racing. Millfield lay ahead, its residents asleep, oblivious to the horror rising. "We have to try," he said, reaching for the radio. Before he could speak, the road split open, a gaping maw from which pale figures emerged. Among them, Eliza stood out, her eyes now black voids, her smile revealing pointed teeth. "They're waiting for you," she called, her voice clear through the windows. Ray threw the cruiser into reverse, tires squealing. "We'll go around. There's another way." As they retreated, more ruptures appeared, more creatures spilling onto the surface. The night filled with their otherworldly howls, a triumphant chorus. In the days that followed, Fires ravaged Millfield and beyond. Search teams found empty homes with strange openings beneath floors, and people vanished without trace. Ray and Thomas repeated their tale, but few believed, blaming smoke inhalation or madness. The official report cited a gas leak at Evergreen, with dry winds spreading the blaze. Disappearances were chalked up to evacuation chaos. Yet, as Millfield rebuilt, changes emerged. Cellars were banned, concrete replaced wooden floors, and no one dared mention what might lurk below. I placed the Polaroid back, my uncle's notes a weight on my soul. Most dismiss it as hysteria, but in the dead of night, I hear them. The scratching, the whispers, the faint drumming. They're still there, patient, waiting. How long until they rise again? I wonder, a chill sinking into my bones. The sun rose over Evergreen Children's Home with an almost deceptive calm. Birds chirped outside the crumbling stone walls, and the wind teased the tree branches with a soft rustle. But inside the home, something felt off. The hallways, usually bustling with the restless energy of over 24 children, felt subdued, like the building itself was holding its breath. It was the morning after Eliza Blackwood had uncovered the mysterious silver locket beneath the floorboards. Word had spread faster than wildfire. Whispers about her parents, about the photograph, about what she claimed she could hear at night. Susan returned from math class with a notebook clutched tightly against her chest. Her brow furrowed as she opened the dormitory door to find her suitcase half unzipped, clothes folded differently than how she'd left them. A girl she didn't know sat cross-legged on the lower bunk, flipping lazily through a worn issue of 17 magazine. "You're Susan?" the girl said without looking up. "Yeah," Susan answered slowly, stepping inside. "Who are you?" "Jenny. Mrs. Winters said you asked to switch rooms." Susan's brow furrowed. "No, I didn't." Jenny shrugged, still not looking up. "Well, she moved your stuff. Said you weren't feeling comfortable in your old room." Susan felt a chill trace her spine. She hadn't asked for anything. And why would she? Her only friend here was Eliza, and she had been in that room. She turned to leave, confusion and frustration coiling in her stomach. But before she could step into the hallway, a shrill scream pierced the corridor like a razor slicing through silence. It came from the far end of the hallway, room 17. Eliza's room. Susan broke into a run. Others poured from their classrooms and dorms, a growing sea of confusion. Some teachers yelled to keep order, but their voices were drowned out by the thundering of dozens of feet echoing across the wooden floors. A crowd gathered outside room 17. The door was flung open, hanging crooked on its rusted hinges. Inside, the room looked like it had been ransacked. The bed sheets were tangled, the drawers open, and the mirror above the dresser had a long, jagged crack running down the center, like it had been struck from the inside. Susan pushed through the children, her heart pounding. Mrs. Winters stood just inside, her expression unreadable. She held a clipboard clutched tight to her chest, her knuckles pale. "Back to your rooms," she barked, though her voice lacked its usual authority. "What happened?" someone whispered. "Is Eliza okay? Did she run away?" But Susan already knew the answer. Eliza was gone. The room reeked of mildew and something smoky. The floor under the window had darkened with what looked like soot. Susan stared at it, dread pooling in her chest. No, not soot, ash. Tiny flakes, black and gray, as if something had burned. Right there. "Eliza?" she murmured, her voice lost in the noise. Later that day, after the chaos had settled and the staff had awkwardly explained Eliza's absence as temporary relocation, Susan sat alone behind the greenhouse. It was the only place that felt remotely safe, the one patch of glass and light behind the brooding stone building. Vines crawled the glass walls, and the scent of earth filled the air. She turned the locket over in her palm. Somehow, she had managed to pocket it before staff had arrived that night. She hadn't told anyone. The image inside, Eliza's parents, stone-faced and distant, stared back at her now. She clicked it shut, eyes scanning the nearby woods. "Susan," came a quiet voice. She looked up. It was Marcus, a lanky boy from the upper floor. He had dark circles under his eyes and wore the same oversized hand-me-downs most of them did. "Have you heard?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "If it's about Eliza, yeah," Susan replied. "No," he said. "About the basement." Susan's stomach turned. "What basement?" Marcus glanced over his shoulder. "There's a door. I saw them take something down there once. At night. They don't think we know, but it's under the west wing." Susan narrowed her eyes. "You think that's where she is?" Marcus hesitated. "I think that's where everything starts." That night, Susan didn't sleep. The wind outside wailed like a mourning woman. Somewhere in the distance, she swore she heard tapping again. Soft, rhythmic, like fingernails against a pipe, like something signaling. She sat up in her new room, Jenny snoring on the bunk below. The locket sat on her nightstand, pulsing faintly in the moonlight. Not glowing exactly, but not quite dull either, as if it reacted to the house or to her thoughts. Susan clutched it in her palm. "Eliza," she whispered, "where are you?" The walls didn't answer, but from far beneath the floorboards, in the hidden hollow places of Evergreen, something did. A low hum, almost like breathing. Mrs. Winters shoved through, her face flushed. "What's the meaning of this?" Inside, the floorboards were pried up, a hole circled by odd trinkets, buttons, paper clips, shoelaces. Eliza sat cross-legged beside it, rocking slightly, her lips moving silently. "Miss Blackwood, explain yourself," Mrs. Winters snapped. Eliza seemed oblivious. "Clean this up immediately," she ordered Jenkins, the maintenance man. "Take her to my office." "Don't," Eliza warned, her voice deepening. "They don't like strangers looking." Mrs. Winters's expression hardened. "Mr. Jenkins, escort her." The burly man hesitated, then guided Eliza away, her eyes fixed on the hole until she was out of sight. The crowd dispersed under Mrs. Winters's glare, leaving Susan peering from the doorway. Jenkins knelt, whistling tunelessly. "Kids," he muttered, shining a flashlight into the darkness. "She claims her parents are underneath." He reached in, pulling out a wallet. "What the hell?" he breathed, flipping it open. Susan edged closer. "What is it?" Jenkins snapped it shut. "Nothing for you to worry about. Tell Mrs. Winters I need to call someone." As Susan backed away, she saw his unease. Ray was wrapping up his shift when the call came. "Evergreen reports a find," the dispatcher said. "You sure about that name?" Ray asked, grabbing his keys. 20 minutes later, he stood in room 17, turning Robert Blackwood's wallet in gloved hands. "Found this under the floor?" he asked Jenkins. Jenkins nodded. "Right where she was digging. Felt wrong. Cold with a rotting smell." Ray bagged it. "Anything else down there?" "Just dust," Jenkins said, then paused. "But what?" Ray pressed. "Smelled like bad meat." Ray's radio buzzed. "Dalton, Fire Chief Mercer needs you at the Blackwood property." Secondary search found something. A cold dread settled in Ray's gut. "Tell him I'm on my way." The Blackwood property loomed, its charred remains stark against the dusk. Fire trucks and a cruiser cluttered the yard. Bill Mercer stood by the foundation, deep in discussion. "What VE you got?" Ray asked. "Found a root cellar under the foundation," Bill said grimly. "Blood everywhere." Ray peered into the dark opening, a metal ladder descending. "Anyone down there?" "Waiting for you," Bill replied. Ray nodded, grabbing a flashlight. "Let's go." The air grew colder as Ray descended, the smell of blood and decay hitting him. His light revealed a dugout chamber, its dirt walls braced with old timbers. "This wasn't original," Bill said, joining him. Ray's beam caught a dark stain on the floor. "Jesus," he muttered. Bill crouched. "Fresh, days old." Ray swept the light, finding a crude table with bones, jars, and stone tools. "What were the Blackwoods into?" Bill whispered. Ray's light hit a small door, its lock broken. "Someone's been here recently," Ray noted, nudging it open. A narrow tunnel stretched ahead. "Could connect to old mines," Bill said. A scraping sound echoed. "Animal?" Bill suggested weakly. Ray raised his gun. Stay here. Bill followed with a heavy flashlight. The tunnel widened into a chamber with carved symbols, spirals, figures, raising Ray's hackles. Ray, Bill pointed. A wooden chest sat open, empty. Cleared out recently, Ray said. Bill's light traced fresh footprints. Small, bare. Child's. Ray finished. Eliza was barefoot. Think she came through here? Bill asked. She knew about this place, Ray said slowly. And maybe more. A humming drifted from another tunnel. That's Eliza, Thomas said over the radio. At Evergreen, Mrs. Winters paced, her composure gone. She was last seen at dinner, 6 p.m. missing at 8:30. The room with the floor? Ray asked. She nodded. He entered room 17. The floor repaired. Seems tight. Her bear's gone, Mrs. Winters added. Ray's suspicions deepened. Anything unusual today? She said nothing but oddities since arriving, Mrs. Winters snapped. Dr. One encouraged her fantasies. Where is he? His office, reviewing her file. Ray found Thomas amid papers, glasses pushed up. Dr. One, we've got trouble. Eliza's missing, Thomas said. Not just missing, Ray said. She may have gone back to her property. We found tunnels, blood, heard her voice. How? Thomas asked. Old mining passages, maybe. Did she hint at leaving? Thomas paused. Her story's consistent. The others beneath, taking people. She expects to join them soon. Ray's radio crackled. Dalton, smoke on the East Wing, second floor. Fires spreading. She was right, Thomas whispered. Ray turned to the boiler room passage. Let's find her. The boiler room's dim light flickered as Ray and Thomas descended into the brick-lined passage, their flashlights cutting through the damp air. The hum of the heating system faded, replaced by an oppressive silence. These aren't natural, Ray muttered, noting the deliberate construction. Thomas ran a hand along the wall. Could be from Prohibition. Bootlegging tunnels were common here. After 100 yards, the passage widened into a circular chamber with 3 tunnels branching off. A stone pedestal stood in the center, etched with spiraling symbols. What is this? Thomas whispered, his curiosity piqued. Ray approached cautiously. Matches carvings we found at the Blackwood place. His light swept the tunnels. Which way? A faint hum drifted from the leftmost passage, Eliza's voice, singing softly. That's her, Thomas said, moving toward it. Ray grabbed his arm. Wait, could be a trap. Set by a child? Thomas scoffed. By whoever killed her parents, Ray countered. The singing grew, its melody haunting, raising goosebumps. They entered the left tunnel, its walls shifting to packed earth, braced by creaking timbers. The air chilled, their breath visible. The song's words, harsh, ancient, echoed in Ray's skull. What language? He whispered. Thomas shook his head. Nothing I know. They emerged into a smaller chamber, its floor laid with stone slabs in a circle. Eliza stood in the center, eyes closed, arms raised, singing. Mr. Buttons lay on a carved symbol at her feet. Eliza, Thomas called softly. The singing stopped. Her eyes opened, intense. You came, she said. They said you would. Who? Thomas asked, stepping forward. My parents and the others. She gestured downward. Ray's radio crackled. Dalton, smoke on the East Wing. Fires spreading fast. We need to go, Ray said. Eliza smiled. The fire's their signal. They burn what they can't take. That's why our house went. Thomas gripped her shoulders. There's a real fire upstairs. People could die. She resisted. I'm staying with my parents. The ground trembled, a low rumble rising. Another exit? Thomas asked. She nodded. The big tunnel leads to my old house. Eliza led them back to the chamber, choosing the rightmost tunnel without hesitation. It was wider, its stone walls smoother. People built this long ago, she said, before the others came and made them forget. Ray glanced at Thomas, who signaled silence. The tunnel curved, stretching endlessly. After 100 yards, Eliza stopped. Here, She pointed to a solid wall. Ray's light revealed no opening. "Push here," she instructed, pressing a spot. A grinding noise revealed a narrow passage. "How'd you know?" Ray asked, amazed. "They showed me," she said simply. The passage sloped upward, fresher air hinting at the surface. After another 100 yards, stone steps led to a wooden trapdoor. Ray pushed it open, revealing a starry night. They climbed into a wooded clearing, the distant glow of Evergreen's fire casting an orange hue. "My God," Thomas breathed. "Hope everyone got out." Ray's radio buzzed. "Dalton, copy? One and I are here, half a mile from the Blackwood property. Send help." "Stay put," the dispatcher replied. Ray turned to Eliza, her calm unsettling. "Did you start that fire?" "No," she said. "They did." "Who?" Ray pressed. "The others. Not like us anymore." A drumming sound pulsed from the earth. Eliza's face brightened. "They're calling. They want to meet you." Ray's hand went to his gun. "Who?" "My parents and all who came before." The drumming intensified, the ground shaking. A few yards away, the earth split, soil tumbling into a dark hole. A clawed hand emerged, groping the air. "Get back!" Ray shouted, but Eliza ran toward it. "Mom! Dad!" she cried. The creature rose, pale, elongated, its black eyes reflecting the flames. More figures climbed out, their movements fluid yet jerky. Ray fired, the shot deafening. The bullet hit, but the creature showed no pain, only surprise. "Your weapons are useless," a voice echoed in his mind. Thomas lunged. "Eliza, stop!" But she was already in its grasp, smiling. "They're beautiful, aren't they? They've waited so long." Ray pulled Thomas back. "We need to move." The Sharon thing turned. "Thomas, we've waited for you." Ray emptied his clip, nothing. "The Great Rising," it said. "Every 100 years, we take new ones below." Eliza hugged the creatures. The cruiser sped off, silence broken by their breaths. Thomas stared out. What were they? "Not human," Ray said. His radio crackled. "Evergreen's a total loss. All accounted for except you, one, and the girl." "She's with her parents," Ray reported. Over the hill, Evergreen blazed, fires spreading. "It's as she said," Thomas murmured. "We must warn them." "About what?" "They'll call us crazy," Ray said. "The fire's enough." The road ahead bulged. "No," Ray whispered, stopping. "They're everywhere." Millfield slept quietly beneath a starless sky, nestled between fields that stretched endlessly in all directions. The town's lights blinked faintly in the distance like the last dying embers of a fire. No one stirred. No one saw what was coming. Inside an old, mud-spattered SUV hurtling down the main road, Ray gripped the wheel tighter with every passing second. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the freezing air outside. Thomas sat in the passenger seat, clutching a flashlight and an old hunting rifle. Though his hands trembled so badly, he could barely keep them steady. "They have no idea," Thomas muttered, staring at the horizon. "They're just sleeping." Ray didn't answer. His jaw was clenched so tightly it hurt. Instead, he reached for the radio mounted to the dash. "We try," he finally said, pressing the transmit button. "If we can't stop them, at least we can warn someone." But the moment he let go of the button, static filled the cabin like a scream from the void. The transmission didn't go through. The road forked ahead. A broken sign swung lazily in the wind, pointing left toward Millfield and right toward the old logging trail, now overgrown and rarely used. But before Ray could make a choice, the SUV's headlights caught movement. Figures emerged from the treeline. At first, they looked like people, children even, small, hunched, moving oddly. But as the light revealed their faces, Ray's breath caught. Their eyes were black, solid, bottomless voids. Their skin looked stretched, like something had worn their bodies from the inside out. And at the front of the group was a familiar figure. "Eliza!" Thomas gasped. She stepped forward, barefoot on the asphalt, her white gown dirty and shredded at the hem. Her hair blew wildly around her face, but her features were unmistakable. except for one thing, her mouth. It curled into a grin far too wide, revealing rows of sharp, jagged teeth that shimmered in the headlights like wet glass. "They're waiting," she called. Her voice didn't sound like hers. It was layered, wrong, like something else was speaking through her. Ray slammed the gear shift into reverse. Tires squealed as the SUV lurched backward, dust and gravel spraying into the night. "Another route," he shouted. "There's no going through them." But it wasn't just the road ahead. The ground behind them cracked. Long, narrow ruptures opened in the asphalt like splitting skin. And more of the creatures, some crawling, some limping, some sprinting, began pouring out. Their howls filled the night, a sound that didn't belong to anything natural. It wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It was something far older and more primal. Ray turned the wheel hard, veering off the main road toward the old trail. Branches scraped the windshield. Trees closed in on both sides, the headlights struggling to penetrate the thick darkness. They drove in silence for miles, the sound of breath and engine mingling with the occasional distant shriek that echoed like a warning. They didn't sleep that night. Days later, Millfield was gone. No news stations reported it at first. The power had gone out hours before the incident. And by the time authorities arrived, nothing was left but smoldering buildings and ash-choked streets. Flames had consumed entire rows of houses. Trees were blackened silhouettes. And strangest of all, every home they entered had one peculiar thing in common. The floors were split open. In living rooms, bedrooms, even kitchens, holes perfectly shaped and deep led straight down into the earth, like tunnels dug from below. Not one body was found, not even a bone. People had vanished. Ray and Thomas gave their statements. They told their story about the locket, the children at Evergreen, about Eliza, about the creatures, about the voices that came at night. They pleaded with the investigators, begged them to dig deeper, but no one listened. The official story, published quietly in a single regional paper, cited a gas leak. A freak explosion, perhaps triggered by an underground fault line. A tragedy, yes, but a natural one. No mention of the missing people. No mention of the holes. Ray sat at the edge of a dried creek bed 2 weeks later, watching the waterless rocks in silence. Thomas was gone, checked into a clinic after suffering a breakdown. He hadn't spoken since they left the town. In his hand, Ray held the locket. He had taken it from Eliza's room months ago. He hadn't opened it since. But now he clicked it open. The image inside had changed. No longer a picture of Eliza's parents, but a photo of Millfield, engulfed in flames. Above the town, just barely visible in the smoke, was a figure. A girl with black eyes and a too-wide smile, standing with arms outstretched, waiting. He closed the locket and looked toward the horizon. Somewhere out there, the ground was still shifting. Somewhere, the children were still whispering. Somewhere, something ancient had awakened, and it wasn't finished. As Millfield rebuilt, cellars vanished, concrete replaced wood, and silence shrouded the underground. I set the Polaroid down, my uncle's notes a burden. Most call it delusion, but at night, I hear them scratching, whispering, drumming. They wait below. How long until they rise? The thought chills me.